Paul's not talking to pastors. I mean, there's probably a pastor there because it's written to a church. But he's not targeting this at pastors. He's targeting this at Christians. And he's not even really talking about preaching. What's he talking about? Church conflict, right? That's what he's talking about. He's only talking about his preaching to deal with this other issue of the conflict that's going on in the church. And you think, okay, we've got conflict in Corinth. What are we going to do, Paul? How are we going to resolve that? You got to have you got to get people together. You got to have maybe a seminar on communication. I read this great book in the self-help section on communication, Paul. Let's get the people in circles and talk about communication in the church and fix this problem of division. Paul says, you got a problem with church conflict in the church. And so here's how we're going to resolve it. We're going to talk about Christ crucified. We're going to go to the cross. That's what's going to fix the problem in your church. It's the gospel that's going to fix the problem in the church. It's not some new method. It's not some new strategy. It's not some self-help book. You need more Christ crucified. If you thought I was going to move on from that because you've got a conflict now and you think you need something else, you're in for a surprise. We're going right back to the basics. Christ crucified. That's all we need to know. Anything else is inferior knowledge, inferior wisdom, and it isn't really all that useful. And so I'm telling you, Paul says, why I preach the way I do so that you'll understand how to live as a church in light of the cross. Why would Paul resolve to know something besides Christ crucified when Christ crucified determines everything for the Christian? Everything. This is the heart of the Word of God. This is the testimony of God. He sent His Son to die for sinners on a cross. And this message has implications for every conceivable issue of life and ministry. You have a problem with church unity? What are you going to do about that? Paul says if you have a problem with church unity, you need to go back to Calvary. And you need to learn what the cross says about humility and love and grace and mercy and weakness and forgiveness. Church family, we will never get beyond the cross. We will never get beyond the cross. Still battle sin. Still have struggles. You still have temptations. You still have conflicts in your life. You know what you need? It's not the follow-up class to the cross. You just need to understand how the cross speaks to that problem. And that's what Paul's going to do for this whole letter. He's going to show the Corinthians how the cross speaks to conflict, sexual immorality, lawsuits, marriage, singleness, spiritual gifts, paying your pastor, your view of the end times, giving on Sunday morning. All of those things live under the shadow of the cross. Every problem we have in our lives, every problem we have in our church, every problem we face in the world is solved by the cross of Christ, by Christ and Him crucified. Beloved, we don't need more 21st century. We have too much 21st century in us already. We need more first century Calvary at the cross. And Paul made it his absolute resolve to know nothing but Christ because there is nothing greater to know but Christ and Him crucified.